If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for the up. Let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know who. Wanna go, gonna glow.
Aloha and welcome back to the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Today's opponent preview is for the San Fran 49ers. Packers. The Packers, like I said, not their overall season, but they saved whatever chances they have to win the division by a fingertip on Sunday by knocking off the Bears. And this week it's another big game in terms of playoff seeding because basically at this point, I mean, they basically only have NFC games at this point. You know, you play the Dolphins next week, but you really can't afford to lose any more of these NFC games just because you've already lost 3 of them and you're chasing teams ahead of you at this point. So Green Bay's got to stay in the running, and you're facing a desperate 49ers team. You know, the easiest way to put where this 49ers team is this: they are the epitome of the Super Bowl loser hangover. They've been decimated by injuries. We'll get into that, but you know, Green Bay still isn't playing anywhere close to A plus. Forget A plus. They're not even playing B plus football at this point. Honestly, getting B plus football should be enough to beat what is a wounded duck 49ers team. And again, just starting off as we usually do, we'll go over the injuries. You know, the big one today is that Jair was a DNP with the knee injury. No real update on that. We'll see how he trends the rest of the week. But honestly, at this point, I'm kind of thinking he's probably not going to play on Sunday. And then you just have a whole lot of limiteds. The one that doesn't count is Elton. He's an old, so he got rest today. But otherwise, just a carryover of injuries from the previous weeks. And on the 49ers side, you've got a bunch of DNPs. The big one being that Nick Bosa is, I think, ruled out at this point. But George Kittle said that he is going to play. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they said that he's going to probably miss a few games.
Yeah, they said that basically he feels worse this week than he did last week. And on top of that, interesting that Trent Williams is listed as a DNP with an ankle as opposed to just like old. Charvarius Ward, their best corner, missed practice with a personal matter. And Christian McCaffrey got rest because they do not have a running back rotation at this point. But Joe, I know it's not a division game and the Niners aren't, it's not the measuring stick it's been in the past, but I know we've been saying it almost every week for the last month and a half, but big game for the Packers coming Sunday, right?
Right. And, the 49ers are pretty well a rivalry. I mean, even going back to the 90s, you can call it a rivalry. And, I'm sure a lot of people still remember the Rice, did he fumble, did he not fumble? And Terrell Owens and all that shit going on. So it is a big game because it would help get a little bit of the monkey off their back when it comes to San Francisco. Plus it is at Lambeau. So you want to have a good showing at Lambeau. And then, go into the short week because, like you said, next week's game against Miami is on Turkey Day. So it's going to be a short turnaround for these guys. But yeah, just looking, they were saying that Purdy and McCaffrey probably have the best shot at playing.
Yeah.
But Purdy's dealing with the right shoulder issue, which is, his throwing arm. and McCaffrey is coming back from the Achilles injury. But yeah, it's a long list of guys on there, but ours isn't much better. The one that surprises me with the Packers is the Edgerrin Cooper hamstring, because wasn't his more of a hip problem earlier in the season?
Yeah, the hamstring was actually what he dealt with first in training camp, I think, and then the hip came up later in either in preseason or earlier or later in or at the beginning of the regular season. So yeah, not great, but you got to just make do with what you got. And yeah, the biggest thing for the Packers this week is it doesn't really matter who lines up for San Fran. It doesn't matter who you do or don't have on the Packers side of the ball. You've just got to execute cleanly, and they they we covered it in the game review. They did a better job avoiding penalties this past Sunday, but still couldn't avoid a turnover, and still are just struggling mightily in the red zone. And their opponent this week is the team that is 0.06% better at scoring touchdowns in the red zone than they are. The Packers are 27th and the Niners are 26th in the league in red zone efficiency. So just can't leave opportunities on the field. As much as everyone talks about the Anders miss and Love throwing a bad interception on the final possession, it really comes down to, you only score 6 points on your first three red zone possessions in the playoff game last year. And you just can't, and it's a problem that has continued to hound the team coming in, through the first 10 games of this season. They just have not been efficient scoring touchdowns in the red zone, and you've just got to convert against this team. San Fran, they're not by record a good team, and they're not as dominant in their stats as they have been in the past. But this is still a dangerous team, and like I said, they're a desperate team because they, you know, similar to Green Bay, they had a relatively must-win division game last week, and they blew it, and they've blown a couple of those. They blew last week's game against Seattle, but then they've blown one to each of the Rams and the Cardinals, and so they're in a very similar position to Green Bay. And Green Bay's really just got to come out and put the hammer down on these guys, and it all starts on attacking the San Fran offense. And something we talked about is on the game review is Halfley's his tendency to use soft coverage as a binky if Jair isn't playing, and that just can't fly this week. You've got to get up and challenge these 49ers receivers. Brandon Ayuk is on IR, and Debo has been not nearly as good as he's been in the past this season. And Jawan Jennings, who I do like, has not been the same guy since having to step into that wide receiver 2 role as he was as their third wide receiver when he was the one that basically made all the clutch plays on that game-winning drive for San Fran last year. For once, Joe is the one with the visitor today. Oh
Yeah,
no.
like I told Mike before we started recording, I don't have my normal dog watchers because they decided to take vacation at the same time. So she's been spending a lot of time in the house by herself, and now she gets clingy.
So adorable though. But yeah, so the Packer, Halfley's going to have to change things up this week. I understand, wanting to play it safe without your best corner, but you saw what this pass rush did on Sunday when the game was put on the shoulders of Caleb Williams. They got back-to-back sacks when, Halfley pressed up and basically was like, okay, you're going to have to throw the ball with pressure. Every other time, people were saying why doesn't he blitz, or how come that blitz didn't work and stuff. It's because there was always a relief valve for Caleb to hit. And the whole part with blitzing is that you've got to take some to give, or give some to take some. And you're it's a gamble that you're trying to hedge your bets on. And Halfley's just got to be a little more aggressive. I know the options that he has at his disposal aren't ideal, but I mean, I feel like you're in the same boat, Joe, that we both would like to see just more aggressive coverage and kind of damn the torpedoes approach that, if you're going to get beat, like, just don't let this team slow bleed you to death, because they will just bludgeon your face in if you allow the 49ers to.
Well, this is where I'm sitting at. I agree with what you're saying, but this is where I'm sitting at. We need to stop seeing 99% of the snaps played by Keyshawn Nixon and more than I lost his name. More than 6% and 1% for Eric Stokes and Corey Ballantyne. We both talked about this on the Bears review, that why he just sticks with the same core guys out there when there are other ones riding the bench that, okay, they may not be the best in the world, but you've got to do something, because Keyshawn's definitely not the answer. And I like Keyshawn, I like his attitude, I like what he brings, but he's definitely not a boundary corner. And for him to play 99% of the snaps over Eric Stokes' 6, Corey Ballantyne's 1%, even Carrington Valentine only's played 72% of the snaps, I think I read. So no, he played 89%. So I mean, that just it, you I don't get I get that Halfley was big about, oh well, I love what I see out of Nixon when Halfley first signed on as the defensive coordinator, but he's not showing it. And I've said this before, I don't give a rat's ass about what PFF says. I don't give a rat's ass about what analytics say. He's not passing the eye test. So something's got to change on that. Whether they activate Rochelle this week, they bring up one of the corners from, or what's his name, Hayden, from the practice squad. And this is another thing that we should talk about real quick. I know I said earlier that we need to make a quick episode, but I'm going to go on. Why did they bring Alex Magoo back?
I have no idea.
I know
I
they had the open spot on the practice squad, but you're going to bring a 28-year-old guy converting to wide receiver for the first time in his life and has limited athletic ability, when you could have easily brought in some young guy at corner that has potential, and you could work, you could, what's the word for it? You could
just take a flyer. Yeah, I mean, shit. If you're
take
worried
a
about the,
flyer and
yeah,
and build him up.
yeah, or shit. Even if you're worried about like familiarity and how long it takes, you can bring back David Long, who was on the like playoff roster last year. He was on the practice squad for the playoffs last year. Um, and
Isn't he on a practice squad though?
is
Like
he?
Miami's or something?
No, I think you're thinking of the linebacker. I'm talking about the corner.
No, I know what one you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure he is also on a
Yeah.
practice squad.
Let's see. That would be good to know. Oh, you're right. Looks
Colts.
like he's with the Colts. Yep. So there you go. But yeah,
Ha! I knew something that Mike didn't know, so suck it.
fuck. There's your shut the fuck up moment for the week. But like, yeah, it it doesn't make a lot of sense.
There's other ones out there that they could have, that probably has the same familiarity, that at least in the system, you know, you got Robert Sala in there as your advisor. Isn't there surely somebody that he's worked with that he could have said, "Hey, you might want to bring this guy in.
Yeah.
He looks like he could be legit." But you bring Alex fucking Magoo back in?
Yeah. And
Come on now.
especially this week, you've just got to be more aggressive and make Purdy make some tight window throws, because the whole reason that he not sat out, but that he was like, apparently he participated in like the conditioning part of practice, but he did not throw the ball much, if at all, today, is because they're like concerned he has dead arm in the middle of the season, which is really bad for a guy who doesn't have the greatest arm to start with, and has basically had Tommy John surgery. He had a UCL injury a couple years ago in the playoffs. And like, if he's having, so wait, what did they list it
It
as?
makes you wonder, because he had the unconventional Tommy
Right,
John surgery. He didn't have
right,
the legit surgery. He had that cage or whatever, that mesh
right.
cage that they put on it.
And that's the thing, is like, so it's like you said, it's the shoulder they're listing, but is it one of those? We always talk about how like with leg injuries, it's just like overcompensating, and like soft tissue injuries tend to travel up the trunk of the leg, kind of thing. Is this an issue where like because his elbow, he might be I don't know, but if he's changed his throwing motion to protect the elbow, is that extra load that's put on his shoulder, or is it just that it's he's gotten crunched a few times in the last few weeks? But either way, don't let him get comfortable with warm-up throws out there. Tighten up the coverage. Trust, okay, I don't even want to say trust your guys, but like give your pass rush a chance. And if you don't get it because the corners get beat, so be it. And that's the thing, is it's like you're not gonna win a physical match with the Niners. You're just not. Your team's not built that way. No matter how much toughness and dragging people out to deep water Salah could have given your team in a month, you're just not built to be that team like the Niners are built to be that team. So, like, don't play the long game. Cobra Kai it, strike first, strike hard, no surrender,
No
and
mercy.
no mercy. And the good thing is that LaFleur has had better success against the Niners under Shanahan at home. I know we've only played him like 3 times, 2 or 3 times in Lambeau with Shanahan,
The
and have
Packers
granted.
have the Packers have also had better times against them in season than it is during the postseason too.
Yeah,
So
and so like, but like I said, the thing it keeps going back to is force the issue on defense, because don't let a team that's desperate to get back in the playoff race, get comfortable and dictate terms. Green Bay has to look at this as not only their opportunity to keep pace with Detroit, Minnesota, but also this could potentially be a game that, obviously there's still 6 games to go after this, but this could be a game that would be the straw that broke the camel's back and potentially is one of the reasons San Fran doesn't make the playoffs this season. And you've got to really approach it that way. And LaFleur, he always beats up on McVay. Start beating up on this fucking Shanahan and with the freaking fraud of a father and shit like that. I can't stand that family. Goddamn 97, 98 Broncos and the most overrated coach in NFL history. But
that's how
aside
you really
apart,
feel.
I just think he's an overrated sham, and I think that his son is a choker. But that's neither here nor there.
I
Um,
lost a lot of respect for Mike Shanahan after how he handled the Robert Griffin III
oh, that was
debacle.
terrible. That was horrible. Like watching him play that playoff game was sad. Like that was sad, and the
Especially
fallout
even
after
with
it.
the knee brace on, you could see the knee completely buckling on him no matter what he did.
Yep. But the other side of this too is that, and I'm not sure how injured he is or isn't, but Trent Williams was a DNP today with an ankle injury. And if he is any kind of limited, that San Fran O line goes down a really dark path, because he is alone the reason that they have a quote unquote good offensive line. The rest of those guys are nothing to write home about. And you just, if he is at all compromised, it gets really hard for them to do anything on offense. So it all ties back into control the line of scrimmage, but you also you can't, game up front if you're just gonna leak easy yards on the back end. So Halfley's gotta show, because like I said, I'm going in with the expectation that Jaw's not gonna go this week. And I need Halfley to show us something that it's like, okay, like I see that, against bad offense, Chicago's, Jacksonville's, this sort of like let it play out approach, it hasn't worked very well. You've got to put, the pedal down and force the issue against this Niners offense. And I say it all the time. No matter how well Purdy plays in this offense where Shanahan is spoon feeding him big plays, you see it a few times a game and we saw it, and Green Bay dropped every freaking one of them in the playoff game. But the guy that he was at Iowa State, that was just a bonehead at different times in games, he is still in there, and you've gotta apply pressure and tighten the windows on him to and then take advantage of those opportunities, which I do think Green Bay has a much better secondary, especially at the safety level in terms of that side of it, than they did last year. So you've got to take care of opportunities, but you also have to apply pressure to create them. And I really hope we see something a little different. Like you said, like you brought up, starting from a personnel side of it. I agree with you. Keyshawn's a great dude. Love the attitude he tries to bring to.
If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Granger understands that you go to great lengths and sometimes heights to ensure the power is always flowing, which is why you can count on Granger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRANGER, click Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
The team at all, but it's time to try something else at corner. Like, he shouldn't be playing corner next year. I don't really think he should be playing it at much more this year. Just go with. So, I brought it up. Like, if you're not gonna play Stokes down the stretch here, just cut him already. Like, it's doing neither side any good. And like,
Why didn't they just ship him off for like a player for player
right,
trade before
right.
the deadline?
Kind of like the Josh Jackson for Isaac Yadam. Like, Yadam wasn't a good player either, but it's like, you're obviously not going to play Jackson, and Stokes is kind of fallen into the same doghouse as Jackson has. And it's like, you're not bringing him back next year. So if you're not willing to play him the back half of this season, you're not bringing him back next year. So either play him or, shit or get off the can kind of thing. So, yeah.
Or even, like I said, Corey Ballantyne, because Corey Ballantyne was just over 65% on special teams too, so he wasn't even playing. 1% on defense, 67% on special teams.
And I do think that's more
Against the Bears.
because I think that's more because he doesn't play all the special teams. I think he's definitely on punt. I want to say he's on punt return, but he's obviously not on like field goal and PATs and stuff like that. So,
Right,
yeah.
but it goes to show that he's not getting the playing time any more than anybody, any more than
Yeah.
Stokes is. And he was a guy that they relied on heavily last year when Jair was down
Yeah.
and Carrington was down and all that was going on. Then you've got the two guys on the practice squad in Kalen King and Kamal Hayden. You know, King, I know you can't go off preseason too much, but he was the preseason darling. So there's got to be something to it. I don't get. And this isn't to say Halfley's system is bad, because we've seen Halfley's system work tremendously. But his decision making right now on sticking with stuff that doesn't work, isn't that one of the first signs of
Insanity.
insanity?
Yep.
Is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping that a different result happens.
Yep.
So I mean, it boggles my mind. You rotate your friggin' edge rushers like there's no tomorrow, but you won't do the same thing for your fucking cornerbacks. I don't get it.
Yep. So it's hopefully, we've seen Rashawn start to heat up a little bit the last couple games. You want to see that continue to go. Devontae has been a little quiet since he's come back, but you want to see if he can step his game up a little bit as well. And yeah, like it's right there for you. And you just got to go and take care of opportunities here. And like I said, this is a big one for Green Bay. And as much as we talk about the defense and stuff, I said it during the review show, it's on this offense to get its shit together. Jordan, like I said, outside of that missed throw, I thought Jordan had a really good game against the Bears. But you cannot have red zone, you can't have red zone turnovers against bad teams like the Bears. You really cannot have them against a good, I know their record doesn't show it, but this is still a dangerous better team in the 49ers, and you cannot be turning the ball over in the red zone like that. And the Niners, they've lost a lot of talent. Like Eric Armstead, he's playing for the Jaguars now. Javon Hargrave is on IR right now. I think Greenlaw has been kind of in and out of the lineup and stuff. They're just
He's
dealing with a
on
lot of stuff.
pup, I think. Reserve
Yeah.
pup is what I saw.
Oh yes, yeah, he
I
hasn't
think.
been activated yet. And then I think Hafunga is still on IR too. So it's you know, not saying that it's going to be a walk in the park or anything like that, but you've just really got to take advantage of this. And this 49ers defense, they're still aggressive. They still play with a mean streak. Green Bay has the kind of talent that you can get these guys, especially if Bosa is out. And it starts with taking care of the ball. And LaFleur just has to not lose his mind at crucial points in the game like he did against the Bears. And Love has to play within himself. And I do think we saw signs of that. The the drive where they turned it over on downs in the red zone, on third down, on face value, you're kind of like, oh, like, why didn't he try to throw the ball? Why did he take a sack? Running out of bounds for a no gain is a sack on a passing play. So, but it's because it's like, don't throw the ball late over the middle, don't throw the ball as you're running out of bounds and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, he's learning a little bit. But yeah, you just gotta take care of the football and take advantage of everything. But what's the big thing you're looking for from the offense this week?
Pretty much the same thing. No turnovers. Keep the penalties to a minimum. Hopefully we can get a little bit more. Not saying I'm not happy to see Christian Watson get his targets, but hopefully we can get back to spreading the ball around a little bit more. Dobbs and all those guys, and get the tight ends involved a little bit more. And the decision making, again, going back to the decision making, Matt LaFleur making the play calls. No more of this fucking handoff up the middle when you're on a 2-point conversion, or try to run an RPO on a 4th down conversion in the red zone and shit like that. Make sure you're calling the right plays for the right situations. But really, I would love to see a turnaround with Rashawn Gary. And I know you said the offense, but I overall you covered everything with the offense. So the defense, with what I'm really looking forward to this game, is a turnaround with Gary, seeing that maybe, hey, I had my sack on a bull rush. Let's start doing the bull rush. And I think even if Trent Williams plays, if he's got a bum ankle and Rashawn can put him on skates with the bull rush, he's going to feast all game. I know Trent Williams is one of the best in the league, but if he's on a bad wheel, a bull rush is going to end it. So, I'd love to see that. But offensive wise, you pretty much covered it all. There, cut the penalties, cut the mistakes, rush the ball a little bit more. Maybe I love seeing Josh Jacobs get a little bit more, or I mean, having the amount of carries he has, but maybe start running the dual, what they call the package when they put Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon in there
Oh,
at
the
the same
pony.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah, the
pony
pony.
package. Maybe do that a little bit more with, like, Brooks and Jacobs, or Brooks and Wilson, and get that going a little bit more. And just, this is the type of game that this week and next week, I would say, are the 2 games that I would pull out all the stops. Just let it go. And that's not because these are amazing, amazing opponents, and all that. It's just Jordan's healthy. We need to see what this offense can do fully before we have to go against the Vikings and the Lions and the Bears again. So pull out all the stops, full bore into the playbook, and just let it rip.
Yep, totally agree with you. And you're right. This is an opponent that you would have, like in college they called it a July drive, where it's like you've got a bunch of plays that you've been working on for months for a team. And I do think the Niners are that kind of opponent where it's like, yeah, the floor is like, I've got some stuff in the bag for you, and just
Oh,
execute.
draw it up on the sideline again.
Yeah.
That one play with Malik Willis was drawn right there on the friggin' sideline. Do that a couple of times a game.
Yep. Yeah, and like to add to your point about being a little more unpredictable, put Willis in the game on the goal line. Like, do some funky ass shit. Like, I don't think you're gonna hurt Jordan's feelings if you give Malik a couple snaps here and there in red zone situations.
Well,
And
you don't even have to take Jordan off the field. Do it Wildcat style, where you line Jordan up wide, extra wide, and let Malik run it from the middle. And you could even do a couple fucking plays like that. You
yep,
know, down in the red zone, let Jordan run a friggin' route or let Malik run a route. What's
yep.
it gonna hurt?
Just don't get hurt. That's all. But
Well, yeah, just don't get hurt. But I mean, the Philly special. What was that? You'd line up in the friggin' Wildcat formation. You'd run the quarterback out into the end zone, and it was a given. So I could see that going on. But these next 2 weeks is where I say just try whatever you can so you can prepare better for the teams that you have to go against the following weeks.
yeah, especially because that Lions game comes the Thursday right after the Thanksgiving game. So yeah, just try and get as many guys back on track. You brought up that Christian had the big game last week, and that's the thing is like, okay, so in terms of target balance, it might have felt like he got a lot of them, but Jordan only threw the ball like 17 times last week, and that's kind of goes back to my point about not letting San Fran just slow bleed you on while the Packers are on defenses, because you let a bad team in Chicago do that to you last week, and you only touched the ball 6 times on offense, and it just limits the amount of times, especially for a team that hasn't been operating efficiently on either end of the ball this year. You just need more bites at the apple, and I just really want to see LaFleur, whether it's playing with a little more tempo, playing with a little more urgency. Halfley just, you. That's the thing. What was one of the things that we got on Barry for is it's like you just not adjusting to anything. And granted, his was when he had all of his, his pieces on the field. Like I said, I understand why Halfley is calling his defense a certain way, but you can't just let guys have easy completions when they, because they know like, oh, you're going to play a soft cover too. So I've got whatever I want underneath. Got to change it up. You got to, like I said, take a stand and force the action in some regards. So just don't play on your heels this week. Be the aggressor. Be out in front with it, and we'll see what happens. I think Green Bay has the chance to just really make a statement this week, and they have the talent to do it. We've said it all year. They're not. Their 3 losses aren't as bad as they look. There's been a lot of feet shot off, just with all the mental and physical mistakes they've made, and like I said, I'm not even asking for an A game. I'm asking for a B plus game, because I do think with how wounded the 49ers are and how relatively healthy the Packers are, if you play a B plus game, you're going to win this game this weekend. So anything else you've got to look at for this one, or you want to go into over unders?
We'll go into over-unders here in a second, but to go back to what you were saying about, well, he only threw 17 times. He still didn't spread the ball around as well, because if you look at the targets, Josh Jacobs had 5, Watson had 4, and then you go Dobbs 2, Brooks 2, Tucker 1, Wicks 1, Reed 2. So I mean, I know that's a spread out with as little as he threw that game, but it's still, you want to see more diversity. Like, he didn't throw anything to Wilson. He didn't throw anything to either one of his tight ends, really. I mean, he had the one target on Kraft that ended up as an interception. But there's just so much more that he could do, and I think that also goes back to, like, the conservative play calls that LaFleur was doing during the Bears game. So, again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record. Just pull out all the stops. I know they have, like, a 2-inch thick well, I guess it's not a playbook anymore, it's on a tablet. But, motherfucker, I'd drop one of them dictionary-sized playbooks down and say, "This is what we're doing this week." And, and just go with that. So, and same thing with Halfley. You know, stop with the conservative, get a little bit more aggressive with it, use all the personnel you have on hand, and go from there. So, but yeah, we can do over unders real quick. This is another week where I didn't plan for anything. uh, but I think we can still go with the same ones over and over again and be all right with it. But we'll kind of change it up a little bit. With Watson's kind of breakout this past week, let's go ahead and set his over under at 75.5.
I'm going under just because I don't think he's going to get those same kind of target share. Like, I think he'll still get targeted like 4 or 5 times, but I don't think there'll be that kind of plays like he got last week.
I'm going to send him a little bit over, and I think what's going to happen on one of them, and this is me getting the prognostication going and, the crystal ball out and the Swami hat going. I think he's going to end up catching one short, and he's going to get yacked afterwards. And then the rest of them are going to be about mid-range catches. So he's going to hit about 80, 82 yards, but it'll be just a little bit over the 75.5.
And honestly,
Um,
it's possible. What's it? This 49er secondary, they're physical, they're tough, but they're not the greatest athletes in the world. So if you get Watson into any kind of space, it could be very interesting.
One, like you were saying with the injury wise, they're even down a lot on their corners too. Uh, I was looking at that Darrell Luter Jr., Ambry Thompson or Thomas, safety Hufanga.
They basically
They're down a lot.
they don't have their preferred starting safeties this season. So yeah, it's an interesting one for them.
So yeah, I can see him breaking one. So let's go. Let's throw this one out there, and maybe karma will make it happen. We'll go Rashawn Gary over under 1.5 sacks.
Fuck it, over.
I'll go with it because, like I said, if Trent Williams is actually dealing with an ankle injury and it's not one of them phantom things that's just giving him a you know a veteran rest day, I think if Gary continues with the bull rush, Trent Williams is going to have a hard time planting the foot that he's got the ankle problem on, and Gary is going to win the situation.
Yeah. So just for reference, can't really take Williams's his practice availability because he didn't practice at all last week and he started. So that won't be the good tell. It'll be, what he's listed out on Friday and, what how he's doing. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But Rashawn has actually had some success against the Niners. I know he hasn't always rushed against Williams, but he had some interesting plays against them. And I think he's gotten a sack or two off of Trent. So it would be good to see him, continue this upswing that he's had the last few weeks.
Uh, let's see. Well, this one, let's do this one just because we're not sure what Purdy's situation is. And I know you're smiling because you're going to think I'm going to do the McKinney over under half an interception, but I'm going to one up you on this and say we're just going to go the defense as a whole over under 1.5 interceptions. I don't
Over.
even know who their backup is right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I know Josh Dobbs is one of them, but he wasn't the one that was active last week. But yeah, I'll go over. You know what? Yeah, just because they just need Halfley to be more aggressive.
Well, it's either going to be Dobbs or Brandon Allen.
Oh God, Brandon Allen, one of the Allens.
So, good lord, for being in the league for 8 years, he's already 32 years old.
It's because he was in college for forever.
So I'm gonna go over 2, especially if Purdy's not in there.
Even if he's
Um,
in there, he's kind of compromised. And like I said, this is why Halfley's got to press, literally and figuratively press the issue. Press the that's the operative word this week. Press, press the receivers.
I mean, I agree. I think they can get 2 interceptions off Purdy himself, but I think the percentage of chance goes up even more if they have to go to the backup.
Yep,
So, and I think that's about all I got for over unders this week.
yep.
I
So
do technically have a shut the fuck up moment, but I got to get the quote itself. I completely butchered that name. Uh, but basically, I can't find it right now. I should have been a little bit more prepared. But it's basically Pat McAfee when he came out and said that, or he railed against Brian Gutekunst for not being a smart GM, and how Joe Douglas was this amazing smart GM for making the moves he did to bring in Aaron Rodgers and the guys Aaron Rodgers wanted to be brought in. But guess who got fired this week? It sure wasn't Brian Gutekunst. And guess whose team is not in the gutter right now? It sure isn't Brian Gutekunst. So I really, and I will be the first one to admit I can't stand Pat McAfee for nothing. If he's on my TV, I turn it off. If he shows up in my feed, I immediately ignore it. I not that I follow a lot of wrestling anymore anyway, but anytime he's on commentary, I shut it off. I can't stand the guy, but for him to be such a to blunt about it, such a dick rider for Aaron Rodgers and blame everything on Brian Gutekunst and call Goody a basically a bad GM for cutting ties with Aaron Rodgers. Who's in the better situation right now? Jets or the Packers?
it's not even close. Not even just saying that he's a bad GM. He basically called him dumb. Like, I don't
Right.
remember if he used the exact words, but he, for all intents and purposes, said that Joe Douglas, like you said, he's a great GM, he's a genius, and Gutekunst is dumb for you know whatever way he framed it. Whether he framed it as letting the Rogers situation get to where it was, or getting taken to town and stuff. And it's also funny seeing Jets fans like try to apply heavy amounts of copium to the whole situation, because they're like, oh well, it came out as a wash because the Packers, all they got was Van Ness. I forget who they tried to say the second round pick was, and
Was it
and
the
a
same
kicker that,
used on Reed?
yeah. So it just gets funnier and funnier. But yeah, they can think whatever they want, and it is what it is. But like, the Packers don't have to deal with that headache. They don't have to deal with the cap hell for they're carrying the dead money this season, and then next year there's no more dead money and stuff like that. So
Right, and it's so well that I was reading something today that the Packers will have enough money to sign another Xavier McKinney like contract
yes,
next year without having to do any restructures or releases or
it
anything like that.
and one knock against Gutekunst, it does come because the 21 draft was not great, and the 2020 draft as well. But I mean, the 2020 draft, you got your quarterback of the future, and fuck all the idiots who are saying like, was it a mistake and all that kind of crap. Like, you can shut up with all the Jordan Love talk. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna work out really well. Let's see him play not injured before we make scathing, stupid snap reaction type of takes on his contract extension. And you know you've got money, like you said, to sign some kind of free agent, and you're going to have to extend a Zach Tom, extend, start working on a Rasheed Walker extension and stuff like that. But you have the flexibility to do that. You don't have to
Well,
say,
and the
"Oh,
big decisions on the wide receivers next year too. So
yeah." But at least you're not like, at least it's a, okay, we'll get one, and it's not like a, uh-oh, we have to pick the right one, but if we pick the wrong one, and we'll lose the other one, and we'll get outbid for that one too, so we end up with nothing, kind of thing. At least it's, we're definitely getting one, kind of thing. And I know this will sound outlandish, those two are the ones that you definitely got to keep one of those guys. And I'll let other people debate about, I'll let other people debate which one is the more important one to keep between Watson and Dobbs. But of that class, and the 2023 class, you've got to keep one of those two guys, because they're the pace setters for this offense. And honestly, if you could somehow keep both of them, that would be the most ideal outcome. And that's what not having Rogers' dead money on your cap allows you to do as Gudikun. So, yeah, who's the idiot now?
yeah, and it was an interview with Ian Rappaport, and Rappaport said something about Gutekunst being a genius GM, and McAfee was cross-armed and really genius, shit like that. So basically what we're saying, Pat McAfee, you probably are never going to hear this. I don't care if you do or not. Shut the fuck up. You are wrong. Quit riding Rogers' dick.
Yep. So, it, I can only laugh at that situation. It's just so funny because, like, obviously I didn't wish the injury on Rogers last year, but the way it's played out, outside of the injury, oh god, there goes Marisol.
Hey.
Marisol's giving me away. Marisol's giving me away. I do not have a voodoo doll in the house, but outside of the injury, it is just hilarious how this whole situation in New York has just devolved pretty much by the playbook that everyone in Green Bay expected it to, where that team's not nearly as good as everyone, all the mainstream media thought or wanted it to be. And it is just a flaming wreck. And the only question is, whether that flaming plane is crashed into the ground, or if it's still somewhere descending out of the air at this point. But back to Packers news.
Bad pun right there. That's yeah, no, that's a bad pun. Take that one back.
No, I'm a dad, so I can make them. But circling back to our Packers, like I said, it's just like last year, but they're obviously in a much better position than they were last year. They're still in position to deter, they control their destiny as far as like making the playoffs. And, obviously the division is not in their hands because they blew the two games against the Vikings and the Lions, but making the playoffs, if they, expecting them to win out is very tough. But if you win five of these games, you should make the playoffs, especially if they're all NFC games at this point and all division games as well. So continue to take care of business. And like I said, you shouldn't need extra motivation for this game. But if you do, the Packers can look at this as a potential, like I said, it's not a lock, but you put the Niners at 4-7 at this point of the season, they're at least 3 feet in the ground with maybe one limb sticking out of the coffin, kind of thing. And your own playoff hopes, and potentially ending your opponents, that should be more than enough motivation to put your best foot forward this Sunday. But that's going to do it for us. We will have our recap as usual. We'll record that on Sunday, release that on Tuesday.
And
But
most likely we'll be doing the live stream post game too.
thank you
Or
for
me and Brian should.
Yeah. That's going to do it for us tonight. Please check out the website, ohanapackers.org. Our writers are, like I said, they've come out of the bye and they're churning out articles again. Check out our merch. All of the hard work that Joe puts into that. Should be cheering for the team to do outlandishly cool things and secure wins, because that's where a bunch of the motivation for some of the designs comes from. So whenever anyone does something great, Joe's like, fuck it, I'm putting on a t-shirt. So be sure to keep supporting our two initiatives, troop support and cancer awareness. Check out the podcast on all your social media apps, at Ohana_Packers on Twitter, at Ohana Packers Edition on Instagram, and search Ohana Packers Edition on Facebook. Please follow the podcast on your favorite podcasting apps. Please give us a like and a subscribe, and give us whatever comments you've got for us. We want to hear what you're looking for, so we make the content you're looking for. The Packers look to take themselves to 8 wins on the season in what could be a season-defining victory, and LaFleur looks to get another pelt on the wall, and just beat old friends in old places, I guess, because Shanahan's been there for a while now at San Fran, but just put this team out of its misery. They're, like I said, the Niners are suffering heavily from Super Bowl loser hangover. Put them out of their misery, and like I said, get yourself that much closer to the playoffs. But that's Iowa Joe. I'm Mike. As we always say, go Pack Go, and aloha.
Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for the up. Let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know who. Wanna go, gonna glow.
If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.